Congressman Ro Khanna is going to be with us, taking your calls, or actually is with us. He is the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents California. I believe it's the 17th district, right? Yeah, there we go. And his website is Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Ro, R-O, Khanna. Congressman, welcome back.
Great to be back on.
And I should add, if it's not self-evident, that you're with us for the hour, taking calls from our listeners on whatever topics are at the top of their minds. Our telephone number, 202-808-9925. Congressman, I'd like to just kind of kick it off with a question. I'll speak specifically of Stacey Abrams in Georgia because that story is in the news, but you and I both know this is happening in, I believe it's 27 states now are engaged in massive voter purges and have been since the early 2000s or late 90s. And in fact, the mother of all of these, in terms of people knowing about it, was Florida in 2000, when the BBC, Greg Palast was working for the BBC, and they did a report that played heavily all across England and Europe and was literally never played in the United States during that period of time, where the BBC reported that some 90,000 African Americans had been purged from the voting rolls just before the 2000 election to get by Jeb Bush and Catherine Harris in order to help Jeb Bush's brother George win that state. A story that if it happened in Panama or Nicaragua or Honduras, we'd be calling for the overthrow of the illegitimate government. But in any case, if Stacey Abrams loses Georgia by fewer than the 57,000 votes that Brian Kemp is refusing, people who have registered to vote, but he's refusing to put them on the rolls, or for that matter, if she loses by less than the 570,000 that he's purged from the voting rolls in the last year, or the million that he's purged from the voting rolls in the last couple of years, what should she do? What should Democratic candidates start doing if they, quote, lose an election in a state where it's really pretty clear that election was rigged, and particularly if it was rigged in ways that would have been illegal before the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act?
Well, as we were talking right before the show, Tom, I think the first thing is she should refuse to concede. When Al Gore conceded to George Bush in 2000, that shaped the American public opinion. And it was Fox News, as you pointed out in our earlier conversation, who called that election prematurely for George Bush. So if this is an election that's close, under 50,000 votes, and Brian Kemp continues to refuse to recuse himself as Secretary of State, refusing to certify people who have registered perfectly legally, and that's the difference, then I don't think Stacey should concede. And it's somewhat personal. I knew Stacey back in law school, and she has been someone who has cared about civil rights and cared about economic justice since she was a law student, and she's a fighter, and I hope she won't just concede prematurely.
Yeah, amen. Well, we already have calls from all over the country, so let's just dig right into it. Your calls for Congressman Ro Khanna. Noel in Corpus Christi, Texas. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, Dr. Tom. Hi, Congressman. I'm calling because that editorial that Donald Trump put, the opinion, quote unquote, that was in the USA Today paper was in our local newspaper. They put some comments in there saying this is only an opinion, yada, yada, yada. I called them, complained about it, because I think any opinion from the office of the president is different than any other opinion. I have not seen a rebuttal. I'm hoping there is one that the Democrats and the progressives are going to put out, and I'd like to get a copy and put it in our local paper at least. Is there any information about that?
Yeah, I'm guessing, by the way, Noel, your local paper is probably owned by Gannett, the company that owns USA Today. They own smaller papers all over the country.
They are a subsidiary of USA Today, yes.
Yeah, okay. Congressman?
Well, the best response to Donald Trump's op-ed is Donald Trump's own words. I mean, someone should simply print from his book, The America We Deserve, which he published in 2000, his defense of a single-payer system, his admission back then that Canada had a superior health care system, his argument in that book that while he's usually a free market person, he believes that single-payer health care is cheaper and has better benefits. So what USA Today really ought to do, and these papers ought to do, is take that excerpt from his book and print it, and print that side by side with the op-ed. Of course, Bernie Sanders has done a full response, but Trump is basically contradicting something he believed 15 years ago.
That's amazing, Congressman. I had no idea he'd written a book that said that.
He did. It's in America We Deserve, and he actually says, I think Canada has a better healthcare system than we do. I'm usually a free market person, but when it comes to healthcare, I think a single-payer system is better. And I really think the Democrats need to be pointing this out more, that this was Donald Trump's own view back in 2000.
That is incredible. Joe in Cupertino, California. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Congressman. I'm
Good morning.
really interested in trying to follow up. I made contact with your office, and I got a really nice letter in regards to your support of what's going on with the Kavanaugh thing. But, yesterday I saw Senator Harris interviewing Christopher Wray, and I was dismayed. I think that with Merrick Garland accusing himself from hearing this referral, and his admission that the scope and limitations set by the White House over the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings really concerns me now. Tom has talked about packing the court with more Supreme Court people, but I don't believe we should concede this nomination or this appointment to the Supreme Court with what's sitting out in front of us. I believe, Dr. Ford, and I'd like to know, as a Yale graduate, what you think about the fact that they were in the same class together, that being Christopher Wray and Kavanaugh, and how he can not recuse himself in the appearance, what appears to be a conflict of interest. And I just wonder what action you can take or who you can persuade to continue to run this to ground, because I think the Supreme Court deserves to be fully staffed with competent people, not just whoever's picked. And I'll wait for your answer. Thank you, sir.
Amen. Congressman, did you graduate from Yale Law School?
Yeah, I try not to mention that.
I'm impressed. That's one of the best schools in the nation, Excuse me.
It's anyone who went to Georgetown Prep or Yale is hiding in the closet.
Right,
of
hanging their heads right now, right?
But I appreciate the caller's comments, and let me make two concrete points. First, Jerry Nadler, who hopefully will be chairing the Judiciary Committee, has said that we are going to continue to investigate the matter, and the House Judiciary Committee will have tremendous power over this. Nancy Pelosi has said that the FBI report ought to be declassified and ought to be made public, that we're going to subpoena we're going to subpoena the FBI. We're going to try to do our own investigation to get to the bottom of this. The second thing, in terms of the court expansion, I was just talking to Bruce Ackerman the other day, who teaches at Yale, and he pointed out that one of the things we ought to do is modernize the Supreme Court just from a perspective of what we need for the 21st century. The Supreme Court currently is only hearing 80 cases. That's down from 184 cases during the Reagan administration. The reason that they're not able to hear these cases is they have so many cert petitions, and 9 justices simply isn't sufficient. The court started with 6 justices, and Lincoln and Jefferson added justices. So we ought to look at a reform that would be for expanding the court. Maybe you can have a supermajority required for confirmation to modernize the court in the 21st century, and that, I think, will avoid a constitutional crisis. But if we don't modernize the court and you have majoritarian policies struck down by a counter-majoritarian court, that's going to be far worse.
Yeah, and these are things that can be passed through Congress with a simple majority vote.
They are. One other thing that, and this is Bruce Ackerman's idea, but he's spent his whole life studying the Constitution. You could actually term limit justices and then have them serve on a court of appeals, because the Constitution says they need to be in the judiciary for life, not that they need to be on the Supreme Court for life. So you could see a system of 10, 12 years on the Supreme Court, and then you go down to the Court of Appeals.
Oh, that's interesting, because at the founding of the Republic, they all rode the circuit. In fact, they did that until 1891. That's why they kept expanding, the number of justices, because the number of circuits went all the way up to 10, which is why there were 10 justices during the Lincoln administration. And then, of course, they cut it down to 6 when Andrew Johnson came in, because the radical Republicans were seriously PO'd that Johnson was a Democrat, et cetera, but all that drama. But wow, that's a brilliant idea.
It is. It's Bruce's idea. But, his point is that one of the things he said, it'll stop people from gaming the system. Right now, they look for people in their 40s and 50s. You really want someone at the end of their career, and if you have someone say that you can serve 12 years, 15 years, 18 years, you probably have someone be appointed in their 60s, and then they go and serve on the circuit court, and so you get people also who aren't trying to game the system and have someone be there for 40, 50 years.